Okay, it's a replica of a 1926 Bugatti, and it's a kit car that was produced around the early 70s. So this car here is almost 50 years old as a kit, and it's on a 1970 Volkswagen chassis. And back then, kit cars, they made MGs, they made dune buggies, everything had a Volkswagen underneath it. And I found it in Wisconsin, and it was in pieces. It had a couple owners, and they never finished it. And brought it home a few years ago, and it was more like a winter project, and that's the final result. Always wanted a kit car. I remember when they first came out, I was in the service during Vietnam, and I kept looking at, I got the brochure and everything, and I wanted to buy one, and I had an old VW, but things just didn't work out. So later on, my brother bought an MG kit car, and that got me fired up again, so I found this one, and put it together, built it. Oh my gosh, I've been working on cars since I was 14, and used to drive a 55 Chevy to high school, and I've had all kinds of cars. I wish I had them back, but right now I'm up to about 12 vehicles. So a little bit of everything, from fire trucks to tow trucks to, I've got a Baja Bug. I have a 1930 Marquette, which they only made 1 year. Looks like a gangster's car. And Mach 1 Mustang, 1970, a 72 Vet. So it just keeps growing. It keeps growing. So.
That's a 1966 Nova Chevy 2. It's Pro Street. Got a 555 big block Chevy. It's Brodex aluminum heads, 400 turbo transmission. It's got a 12-bolt Chevy rear end, and worked on it for 7 years. Just got her done about 2 months ago. I just kind of always liked this body style. I went to a lot of shows and seen a lot of them, and just one of my favorite body styles. So I wanted to build one. Well, when I was, I was about 19 years old, I had a IROC. It was 89, and where I was from was from Pontiac, and a guy had a car that was tubbed out and had a big block in it, and I always used to see that car driving around, and my car was stock, but I thought, man, I'd really like to do that to my car, you know, and my parents co-signed for me, and I went to them and said, would you mind if I did that to my car? And they thought I was crazy, but they said, as long as you make the payments, you know, you can do what you want. So I went and bought me a welder and a Sawzall and cut it apart and put a big block in it and tubbed it. And so been doing them ever since.
The car I drove here tonight is a 1983 TVR Tasmin. TVR is a small British car company that's been around since the late 40s, but not many people have ever heard of it. But I have two other TVRs at home, which are both 1963 versions, one of which I bought in '64 when it was only a year old, and still have it. I've just always enjoyed British cars, and TVRs handle very, very well, and I don't have many. I like the way they look. I can blame that on my father and my older brother. My father was driving a car called a Singer 9, which was a British car, and when my brother became old enough to get his license, he learned to drive on the Singer. Then when my older sister needed to learn to drive, she learned on the Singer, and then I learned to drive the Singer. And my older brother went on to buy an Austin Healey, and my older sister went on to buy a Triumph, and I went on and bought a TVR. And just because it was like no other car I'd seen on the road at that time, and I just love them. I really do. Yeah.
'It's a 1989 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham d'Elegance. So you know, it definitely wasn't like this when I started it. It was just plain Jane. Needed new floors, had to replace all that. Needed new top, new headliners, the normal stuff you would get out of something out the 80s that you got to rebuild. I actually had a Regal Limited, and I was selling it, and I wanted to build a Fleetwood like this. And some guys I came across, they said, well, we got a Fleetwood like that, but it needs some work. I said, well, I'll trade you my Regal Limited for this Fleetwood and some money, because the Regal was all done up, custom interior and everything. So that's how we ended up trading for the Cadillac, and then, you know, some money, and that was it. It was time to go to work. I've been in lowriders like my whole life, since I was young, from the lowrider bikes to the model cars to now the real cars. So it's just something I do. But some people get attached to them. I don't too much get attached to them. Like if somebody come with the right amount, I sell them and start another project that I got in my head, or you know, other cars I got lined up that I want to do. So I don't get too attached to them. You get a little attached, but not too attached. I started young, like my dad was into it. You know, he was into hot rods and all that, and I just happened to go the lowrider route. It was more, I don't know, when I first seen my first lowrider, I had to be about 7 or 8, and I just thought it was amazing that a car could raise up and down. I used to see them go fast when I was little, but seeing it raise up and down, I was like, no, I gotta build lowriders. Like, I know you build hot rods, I gotta build lowriders, and that was it. I was hooked. And once you get into it, I don't think it's a passion that ever go away once you start it. Yeah.
Okay, it's a 1979 Stutz Bearcat. They only made 42 of them in '79 for the year. They only made 500 of them between 1968 and 1989. It's all original, 50,000 miles on it. My grandfather was actually the second owner of it, and this was the first car I ever drove. I used to go over to his house as a 10-year-old kid and cut his grass, and he'd let me drive the car around the cul-de-sac. So he passed away 6 years ago and left it to me. Well, just the history with my grandfather, and you know, growing up going to car shows with him. Yeah, good memories with it. You know, again, probably going to car shows with him from a young age. It just, I love it. You know, all these old cars down here are great, so.
Well, it was an old race car. It has a lot of speed equipment. It has Winfield dual carburetors on it, and a high compression head, and a cam and a magneto. It was, by 1950, it was basically a junk car. And it sat untouched in a guy's shop from 1950 until the early 80s. And I bought the car in '83. I talked to him for about 7 or 8, 9 years before I bought it. He always wanted too much money, and I finally decided, well, I had to have it. I got it to run in '83. That was the year. The feature car was Auburn Speedsters in Auburn, Indiana. And I got it to run barely stopping. I took it to Auburn,
took it in the parade the first time. So I'm the first guy to drive it since way before 1950. For 17 years, I tinkered with it, improved pieces, fixed fenders, got chrome plating, never did any mechanical work. So then after 17 years, I had to rip it apart in a million pieces, rebuild all the mechanics, get the engine done, put new wood in the body, put it back together. It took a couple of years to do it. And since then, we've just been driving, taking it to shows, driving it, enjoying it, bringing it here. It's been here almost every year since '06. Last year, got the first place People's Choice, which I'm kind of proud of that because I've never entered in any judging because it's not a professional restored car. I basically did an awful lot of the work myself, and I had good, talented friends that did other stuff. So, other than that, it's a pretty car. It's painted back the color it left the factory. It's terrible to get in and out of for a big guy like me. I'm not graceful at all. Once you get in, it's quite comfortable. My 5th and 6th grade teacher had an Auburn in school, grade school. She drove it back and forth to school. In 1958, I bought my first Auburn, and I've had Auburns ever since. And I've got 5 of them now. It's one of the nicest meets I go to. It's a 2-day meet. People come all over. You see cars you never see anywhere else. We find plenty of people to talk to about our cars. And it's kind of like an old grandma showing pictures of our grandkids, you know. It's the people. A lot of people look at the car, and I like talking to people about the car. I have several other cars. We drove the little Ford truck. That's kind of our transportation here, which we'll be driving home. Trailer, this one here, but we drive that one. But I don't know, we like old cars, and we like coming here, and it's such a beautiful setting. And as you see, the cars never quit running. They're driving constantly here, and I've been out here driving myself. I've been driving the little truck mostly. This car does not corner real good in tight spots. It's a pretty big car, and it's a heavy car. On the road, it's very good. I mean, you go down the road, you turn a regular corner and all that, but you get these little tight corners, and I get a little nervous about it. But other than that, we drive it. We take it on tours. We take it to Auburn, Indiana, most years, Labor Day weekend, to the festivities down there. It's quite a powerful car. It sounds pretty throaty with the speed equipment on it. I have another Auburn that does not sound anywhere near like this one. This one sounds different when I start it up. It looks a little flashy, but that is the original colors of this car.
Well, it's a 1920 Oldsmobile truck, and it's a farm version of the truck, and it's in original condition. I rented a farm in Iowa, and it was helping get ready for the farm sale for the farmer, and his brother had it in the shed there, and Dad always said there's an old truck there, and so the more I saw it, the more I wanted it. Oh, it come from my hometown, and the original owner was a grandparent of a friend I grew up in high school with, all the way from elementary, and once you have something, it becomes your baby, I guess. Oh, probably Dad had old vehicles, and I worked on the Model T when I was in high school and started tearing stuff apart as soon as I was old enough to start tearing things apart. And so it's in the family. There's no other place show like it. That's why we keep coming back year after year, or most years. So.
All right, it's 1930 Marquette. It's a companion car of the Buick, and it was only made 1 year. Depression hit, and that was the end of the car company. It has its own drivetrain. It's not, doesn't share parts with the Buick cars. It was made in Flint, Michigan. Long story, I hope you got enough film. Okay, I went to a car show in Davison, Michigan, and I had taken my Bugatti Replica up there, and there was a Model T for sale across from me. And I recognized the Model T. I thought I had owned it. So I spoke to the gentleman and his wife, and 35 years ago I sold him the Model T. So we got talking, and he told me about the Marquette that he had for sale, that he had restored. And this is an older restoration. It was completed about 1990. So that's about 20 years old, the restoration. And that was it. I ended up with the Marquette. And he was actually here yesterday, and he was very happy to see it here at the village. It's unique. They only made it 1 year, and I've never seen another one. And it's has some very nice lines to it. It's not an original color. It would be either blue or green, but the way Louis Casbar, he's the one that did the restoration. He decided to paint it this color so all the lines in the car would actually pop and really make it like an expensive car, actually. Oh, this is fantastic. This is my first year here, and it's overwhelming seeing all these cars. I believe there's 830 cars registered, and fantastic. Great weekend.
Well, the car is a 1958 Edsel Citation. They made the Edsel for only 3 years, started in '58 and canceled it in 1960. Of this particular version, the Edsel Citation convertible, they only made about 1,800 of those vehicles, and not a whole lot of them left. That's a great question. I have to take you back a little bit. My father, in 1957, moved from Toledo, Ohio to Dearborn to work for the Edsel Motor Company. And when Edsel shut down 3 years later, he was only one of 3 gentlemen who was asked to stay on with Ford Motor Company, and then my dad had a great career with Ford and ended up being a vice president there. And I always told him that I was gonna buy him an Edsel, and he said, "Don't do that, I just don't have room in the driveway." He died in 2008, and I just happened to find this online, and I always wanted to buy one, and I did. And it's named Poppy after my father. Somebody came by and asked if it was for sale today, and I said, no, it is not for sale. Well, my dad started with Ford Motor Company, and our whole family's with Ford. My son works for Ford now. My sister worked for Ford. My brother's a dealer for Ford down out in Denver, and just it's been in our family. So we're all car enthusiasts. I'm the only one who's actually gone and got an antique. But I really enjoy it, and maybe we'll add to the collection down in a couple of years.